Welcome to part 2 of trying to solve Peril at End House by Agatha Christie. This is part of our solve along where I'm trying to solve this mystery with the help of my subscribers. Today's video will contain spoilers up through chapter 17 of Peril at End House, and if you missed part 1 of this series, I will link it in the card. I feel like I have cracked this case and I know who did it and why, but before we get there, let's summarize what we read in this section. I'm also a little irritated because my tinnitus is really loud in my ear right now, but let's get to the summary. Poirot and Hastings are talking about who potentially has a motive to kill Nick Buckley, and in their discussion, they're not really sure who would potentially want her dead. And actually, on page 97 of my edition, Poirot makes a list of who he believes all the suspects to be. And this list includes pretty much all the characters in this book. I think he also puts Ellen's child on it, like as if this 5-year-old potentially is going to murder somebody. But he also includes a J on his list, and J is just basically an unknown quantity, a potential other person who they don't know about currently. Poirot then proposes to Hastings 3 questions. First, why has Nick been having trouble sleeping? Why did she wear a black dress the night of the fireworks when she hates black? And why did she say she has nothing to live for now? We are going to find out the answers to these questions, or at least what Poirot thinks the answers to these questions are, because let me tell you, I am not convinced. Poirot also recalls how the night that they were all gathered at End House for the fireworks, Nick got up to take a 20-minute telephone call, and this he believes is key to the entire thing. Nick confides in Poirot and Hastings that she was engaged to Michael Seaton, the pilot who went missing and has now been confirmed dead. This is evidently what Poirot suspected. He thought that perhaps she was wearing a black dress in mourning for her fiancé. And Nick says that she lied. She actually wasn't taking a telephone call. She was listening to the wireless for news about Michael, and that's how she learned that her fiancé is dead. I guess maybe we should add the late Michael Seaton to this board. That is absolutely shit handwriting because I did it without taking the board down. That looks so bad. Now, as we discussed in part 1, Michael Seaton had this very wealthy uncle named Sir Matthew Seaton, who died shortly before his nephew's ill-fated voyage. Michael was the heir to his uncle's millions, and Poirot theorizes that before Michael's death, he may have created a will knowing that he was going on this very dangerous voyage, and in that will, he could have potentially willed all of the millions of dollars he was set to inherit to his fiancée, Nick. This provides the missing motive, because if Nick is going to get these millions of dollars, millions of pounds from her dead fiance, that gives somebody a motive to want her dead, because if Nick is dead, that means she's not getting the millions. The millions are going to her heir. All of this is seemingly confirmed by love letters from Michael to his fiancée. In these letters, he discusses making his will and even makes a passing comment saying, "Oh, when I was having it drawn up, I had to remember the fact that your name was actually Magdala," which, as we know, is Nick's real name. When Poirot and Hastings mention this engagement to Ellen, the housekeeper, she seems surprised, which Poirot thinks is a little odd because all of these love letters were in Nick's underwear drawer, which is the most obvious and cliche female hiding place. So Poirot finds it a little strange that Ellen, never once looked in the underwear drawer, did some little snooping while she was cleaning. Now, remember, Ellen had a very weird reaction when Maggie Buckley was killed. She didn't seem all that surprised that something was amiss, but she says that she's always felt like End House is, to paraphrase, a bad house with bad vibes. She says it's always just given her the creeps, and she's always felt like this is a house where bad things happen. She says, though, she is surprised that somebody would want to kill Maggie because Maggie just didn't seem like the type of girl that somebody would want to murder. And she mentions that even though she had permission from Nick to go out and watch the fireworks like she did in years past, she chose not to go outside and just stay in the house. And she says it's just because she didn't feel like watching the fireworks, but Poirot finds the story a bit sus. Poirot and Hastings also discover a letter from Nick's best friend, Freddie Rice. And in this letter, Freddie seemingly confirms that she takes drugs. Poirot says that he suspected this just due to the woman's strange manner. She, well, basically seemed kind of strung out to him. This note is on page 131, and it says, "Darling, party was too marvelous. Feel rather a worm today. You were wise not to touch that stuff. Don't ever start, darling. It's too damned hard to give up. I'm writing the boyfriend to hurry up the supply. What hell life is, yours, Freddie." Now, when I read this, my first suspicion was that Jim Lazarus, the Jewish art dealer who Freddie has been having a romantic relationship with, may be her drug dealer because, well, one, the use of the word boyfriend, which at least nowadays has a romantic connotation, and also because there's a subplot in this section where Poirot is looking into this portrait of Nick's grandfather, old Nick. She said that Jim had made an offer on the portrait and really wanted to buy it, and Poirot discovers that Jim offered way above its estimated value. So I was like, is it possible that maybe Jim's actually a drug dealer, not an art dealer? He's a different kind of dealer, if you know what I mean. And so maybe that's why he offered too much, because he actually doesn't know as much about art as he says he does. But based on information we got later in this section, I actually think that doesn't make sense. But I'm just saying that was my first thought at the time. So Poirot wants to find out about Nick's will and who would get her money if she were to die. Nick says that she sent her will to her cousin, the lawyer Charles Weiss, but he says he never received any will. And the Crofts had been witnesses to this will, and Mr. Croft says, yeah, after it was signed, I put it in the post to Mr. Weiss. I'm 100% sure I put it in the post. Meanwhile, the local chief constable tells Poirot that when his men were looking around the murder scene, they discovered a note in the grass saying they need the money or else. Another thing that was strange to me is Poirot talks to Freddie Rice, Nick's best friend, and George Challenger, the Navy man who is in love with Nick. And he confirms to them that Nick was engaged to the late Michael Seton. And there are these two really weird moments. First, Challenger gives a watch back to Freddie, which she says that he had it repaired for her and now he's giving it back. But that was just kind of odd because surely she could have gotten her own watch repaired. Why would she need him as a middleman to go to the watch repair store or whatever? That just seemed fake to me. And there's also a passing comment made that Jim Lazarus once fancied Nick, alluding to that fact. And that was interesting to me. It seems like almost everybody has been in love with Nick or crushing on Nick at some point. Allegedly, Charles Weiss is in love with her, George Challenger is in love with her, and apparently Jim Lazarus had a crush on her at one point. This woman just has a lot of power over men. Poirot and Hastings' next stop is to go to London and speak to the solicitors for the Seton family. The lawyer tells them that Sir Matthew had really good health, but he died suddenly of an internal growth that no one knew he had. He gave his vast fortune to his nephew, Michael, which Michael has now willed to his fiancée, Miss Magdala Buckley. Had she died, then the fortune would have gone to whoever was named in her will. They also go to talk to their friend, Inspector Japp from Scotland Yard, and Japp has been looking into a couple of things that Poirot asked him about. First, he asked Japp to look into the state of Lazarus and Sons, the art dealers. So I guess my theory about him actually being a drug dealer is out the window, because clearly this is actually a legitimate business. And, they're not doing super well, but they are a legitimate business. He's also asked Japp to look into George Challenger's uncle, who it was mentioned that he was a doctor, and apparently he's kind of a little bit of a quack. And there's also a comment about some fingerprints he, quote, wired Melbourne about. Now remember, the Crofts are Australians, or allegedly Australians, because remember Poirot mentioned that he thought maybe they were being a little bit too stereotypically Australian and potentially putting it on. So the fact that they're wiring Melbourne, which is in Australia, makes me think this is something to do with Mr. and Mrs. Croft. Now, throughout all of this, Nick has been in the nursing home where Poirot sent her for her own safety. Poirot has made it very clear to her. He's like, you're not going to let anybody into your room. You're not going to eat any food from outside. And I'm the only person who's allowed to visit you. This is a matter of life and death, Nick. However, Nick didn't obey these instructions because a box of chocolates came to the nursing home. When Nick ate them, she suffered from cocaine poisoning. Now, luckily, she only ate one, so she's gonna make a full recovery. And Poirot confronts her and is like, girl, why didn't you listen to what I told you? But she says, oh, but there was a note on them claiming they were from you, so I thought they were safe. Now, Poirot had actually sent Nick some flowers earlier, sent them to her in the nursing home, so he believes somebody copied that note that was on the flowers and used that to forge his own signature in an attempt to murder Nick. There were actually 2 boxes of chocolates that were brought for Nick. One came in the mail, and the orderly says that Jim Lazarus brought the other one. And Nick, when asked, thinks that the ones that she ate were the hand-delivered box, i.e. the one from Jim. Now, when confronted, Jim Lazarus says that he was bringing those chocolates on Freddie's behalf. The chocolates were a gift from her. Freddie says that Nick rang her up on the telephone and specifically asked for these chocolates. So she was just doing what her friend asked of her. But she says that Nick on the telephone hadn't really quite sounded like her usual self. She thought at the time that maybe she was just sick or something. And Freddie says, no, I wouldn't be able to swear 100% certain that it actually was Nick on the telephone, implying that perhaps a third person tricked Freddie and Jim into delivering this poison candy by pretending to be Nick.
Hello everybody, so I'm back here again because evidently while I was finishing up that video, my microphone died, and so the footage at the end is just me moving my lips with no sound. So I'm back here to do it again, and I think I basically got through the plot summary. I was talking about the chocolate box that supposedly Nick asked for, but Poirot thinks maybe it was somebody impersonating Nick on the phone. And at the end of that section, Poirot devises a scheme where he's going to pretend that Nick actually did die to try to gauge the killer's reaction. I think that was all I had left to say about the plot summary, so now we're going to get to my theory. And I'll repeat what I said earlier, which is that I am extremely confident this theory is correct. I don't want to say 100%, but I would say 99. So if you haven't finished the book yet and you don't want to potentially be spoiled on the end of Peril at End House, then I suggest that you drop out of the video here, give it a like, and I'll see you on Wednesday. But for those of you who want to hear my theory with all of the evidence, I will let you know now. So my theory, my final guess for who the murderer is in Peril at End House, is Nick Buckley, the person who I thought it was the entire time, who I thought it was even before I read a single page of this book. And let me tell you my evidence. Now, what really started this theory is when I was reading the love letters from Michael Seton allegedly to Nick Buckley. There's a part where he mentions flying over Scarborough and how that reminds him of his beloved. He refers to it as blessed, blessed Scarborough. And when I read that, I thought to myself, wait a minute. Didn't somebody else in this book reference Scarborough very recently? And so I went back, and yes, Freddie Rice, Nick Buckley's best friend, is asked by Poirot if she'd ever met Maggie Buckley before. And she says, I did meet her once at Scarborough. And when you look at Michael's love letters, none of them say, to Nick, dear Nick. They all just use vague terms of endearments like darling. So I started thinking, what if Maggie Buckley was the one who was engaged to Michael Seton? Thus, Nick, who needs the money, can kill Maggie and then pass herself off as Michael Seton's fiancée using the letters to claim the inheritance and potentially use that money for End House. Remember in section 1, she said that she was willing to sell the house, but Charles Weiss said that she had a fanatical devotion to it. And so I think perhaps she was lying and making it seem like she was less attached than she was, so it would look like she has no motive. Now, I know what you're thinking, Jackie, that's a nice theory and all, but in the letters, Michael Seton specifically says that his fiance's name is Maggie Buckley, and we know that's Nick's real name. But let's think about this for a second, guys. Magdala. Maggie. What if Maggie Buckley also has the full name Magdala? Both of them are named Magdala Buckley. They just go by different nicknames. So that means if Maggie Buckley is dead and the engagement was secret, Nick Buckley, real name Magdala Buckley, can present these letters as evidence of her engagement to Michael Seton, say, yes, I am the Magdala Buckley who was mentioned in his will, and she can claim the inheritance without anybody to tell her that she's wrong. This would explain why Ellen didn't know about the engagement. Remember, Poirot was surprised that she seemingly had no idea of it because the love letters were hidden in Nick's underwear drawer, and the underwear drawer is like the most cliche hiding place ever, so you would think a nosy housekeeper like Ellen would have snooped and would have found the letters. But if Nick took those letters from Maggie and only placed them in the underwear drawer a few days ago, it makes much more sense why Ellen may have never seen them before. They just got there. Another thing that one of my commenters, Erica, pointed out, and this was a really great observation, Erica, I didn't even notice this, is that the night of Maggie's murder, Nick is wearing a black dress, even though she doesn't like the color black. Poirot believes this is because she's mourning for her fiancé, Michael Seton. But Maggie is also wearing a black dress that night. So is it possible that Nick bought that black dress not because she was in mourning, but because she wanted to look more like Maggie? Obviously, if Nick wants to pretend that somebody killed Maggie thinking that Maggie was her, they need to be dressed similarly, because if they were wearing two different color dresses, there's no realistic way the killer could have mistaken Maggie for Nick. And as for the poisoned chocolates, I think Nick poisoned herself to make it look like the killer was still trying to get her. She could have taken the note that Poirot sent with the flowers and put it in the chocolate box to come up with this convenient story about why she ate them. And she could have actually been the person who called Freddie asking for the chocolates. Currently, Poirot thinks that it was somebody else lying, but maybe it was actually her. So I think those are all the main points. Unfortunately, you will never hear what I originally said, but I think I summed it up quite nicely. I am 99% sure that Nick Buckley is the one behind everything. She killed her cousin Maggie so that she can claim the inheritance from Michael Seton. So we will finish the book and see if I am right. I am very confident, but I'm not 100% sure. If I had to pick a far-off second guess, I guess I would say Jim, just because of that random tidbit about him having been in love with or having a crush on Nick once. Maybe that gives him some kind of motive, but I'm really confident that it's Nick. Let me know in the comment section, who is your final guess? Who do you believe is the murderer of Maggie Buckley? And make sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed. It helps me know what kind of content my subscribers are enjoying. If you want to watch another one of my videos, watch this one where I rank every Agatha Christie book that I've read so far. I'm gonna have to update this video soon for 2025. And drop a magnifying glass emoji if you watched this entire video. Thank you so much for being here today, and have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll talk again on Wednesday for the big reveal.